In today's video, we celebrate the rich history and lore of Imperial Guard Ogryns going back to the very beginning. Well, hi folks, and welcome to the channel. I'm Lee, your Oldhammer host. I'm here with Lynn.
Hello.
Today we're going to review the rich and extensive history of Imperial Guard Ogryns, the most enduring abhumans in the Warhammer 40k universe. Sure, the squats had their own army list at one point, and the ratlings are still hanging in there. But in terms of consistent representation in the Imperial Guard codices and White Dwarf magazine, and in the Games Workshop miniature lines, nobody beats the loyal, smelly, ultra-violent Ogryn. But before we begin our retrospective, Lynn wants to present a little Ogryn dance. Okay, let's begin our journey by traveling all the way back to the magical year of 1987 and the publication of Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader, otherwise known as First Edition 1.0. In amongst Rogue Trader's wealth of foundational Warhammer 40k lore is a section on abhumans, which are described as creatures that have evolved from human stock but have changed or mutated to a greater or lesser degree. These abhumans differ from ordinary mutants, the text says, in that they conform to a recognizable physical standard. In Rogue Trader, the largest of the abhumans are, of course, the Ogryns, otherwise known as Homo sapiens gigantus. However, just a couple of years later in White Dwarf 110, there is a fleeting reference to minotaurs and how they rival the Ogryn in terms of sheer destructive power. But going back to 1987, Rogue Trader explains the existence of Ogryns by saying, "On many worlds, the human stock has mutated into a larger, bulkier, but less intelligent form. This is especially common on high-gravity worlds, but can occur anywhere, apparently as a standard variant on the human type." The book goes on to say that although Ogryns rarely reach the heights of Imperial administration, they have their uses, especially in the army. Note that it says rarely, which indicates that there must be at least a few Ogryns in Imperial admin jobs, probably tax collection and/or customer service, I would assume. So let's take a closer look at the illustration at the bottom of the page, which is really interesting. So this may be, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the very first appearance of an Ogryn in a Games Workshop publication. He's definitely preparing to fire a Ripper gun from the hip, no less, even though the gun itself is not included in the 1987 Rogue Trader weapons list. Also, there is a very enigmatic caption to the upper left of the image. I made a quick online search, and apparently that is part of an old scouting chant, so dib 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 dob 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 is encouraging people to do your best and do our best. So yeah, some good advice embedded in the pages of Rogue Trader for you. For our next Ogryn sighting, we move on to the year 1988, and the first official Rogue Trader supplement, the Warhammer 40,000 chapter-approved Book of the Astronomican, which includes army lists for White Scar Space Marines, Eldar Raiders, and the dreaded Pirates of the Claw Nebula, as well as a three-part Warhammer 40k campaign entitled The Wolf Time. The Book of the Astronomican also includes a 16-page color miniatures guide, which it calls the definitive catalog of Warhammer 40k miniatures, complete with cutout banners. The guide includes shots of many classic early minis, including Gaxed, the Imperial Beastman, and 2 female Imperial Army troopers. And then, of course, there's the Ogryn hero there toward the lower right. Now, I didn't notice this until I started putting the video together, but he is clearly inspired by the Ogryn illustration in Rogue Trader, right down to the matching belt buckle. So the Ogryn hero is this guy here. And I can distinctly remember buying him at a local game store in the early 1990s. This mini is a one-piece metal sculpt by the legendary Jess Goodwin. And as you can see, he's rocking a Ripper gun, which wasn't even part of the Rogue Trader weapons list. Also, he doesn't yet have the bonehead brain enhancement hardware that appears later in the lore. Our next stop is the January 1989 edition of White Dwarf magazine, issue 109. This issue of White Dwarf was my first introduction to the Imperial Guard, who replaced the original Imperial Army troops featured in Rogue Trader. The issue's extensive 18-page Imperial Guard article includes information on Imperial Guard abhumans, including the Beastmen, Ratlings, and Ogryns, which it describes as large, powerfully built abhumans thought to be descended from humans marooned on prison planets long ago. They are valuable troops because of their strength, brutality, and childlike devotion to the Imperial cult. We also finally get stats for the Ripper Gun, the Ogryn's large-bore, drum-fed, burst-fire shotgun. Designed for up-close and personal engagements, the Ripper Gun never misses at short range, has a 1/2-inch area of effect, and benefits from following fire, which means if the Ripper Gun causes a wound, the Ogryn gets to fire again. Fortunately for opposing troops, Ripper Guns are only issued to Ogryn leaders at this time, while the remaining members of an Ogryn squad are armed with hand weapons or hafted weapons, meaning Imperial Guard players at the time needed to find some appropriate close combat Ogryn figures to round out their squads. So this fellow here, we call him Nigel, is another late 80s, early 90s figure that I got in the blister pack back in the days of lead. He is rocking a mohawk and a tank top, which to me fits much better in the bonkers 40k universe than in Warhammer Fantasy. So we imagine he's kind of a camp cook who's been transferred to an Ogryn combat squad, and now he charges into battle with a big butcher's knife. So that is Nigel. Next, we visit White Dwarf issue number 110, which was published in February of 1989, and includes a very educational and entertaining 5-page story devoted to Ogryn lore. The article begins by recounting an Imperial commander's decision to unleash Ogryn squads upon Eldar defenders holding a vital spaceport. The commander is quoted as saying, "Let's see how those degenerate sophisticates handle a healthy dose of pure, unreasoning violence." The main article provides copious details on Ogryn physiology and appearance, including some colorful trivia, such as the Ogryn's disregard for personal hygiene. In the Imperium, it seems, the phrase downwind of an Ogryn is widely used to describe atmospheric contamination. However, despite their odoriferous nature, Imperial Guard Ogryns are valued for both their combat abilities and their utter faith in the Emperor, which also extends to his agents, the Imperial Guard Commissars. Ogryns believe Commissars are in constant communication with the Emperor, and the presence of a Commissar will inspire the hulking abhumans to even greater acts of reckless courage and self-sacrifice. Most Imperial Guard Ogryn at this time use the primitive armor and weapons from their various homeworlds, though they are issued beer can-sized Ogryn grenades complete with pull-tab arming mechanisms. Ogryn sergeants, as we've mentioned, are armed with the sturdy and devastating Ripper Gun, also known as the Ogryn Fragmentation Autogun. Sergeants also receive the Adeptus Mechanicus biochemical Ogryn neural enhancement treatment. The survivors of this brain augmentation procedure are known as boneheads and are subsequently able to operate basic equipment, employ simple unit tactics, and even drive a converted Rhino APC. Here's a full-color page from issue 110 showcasing various GW figures that one might include in an Ogryn squad. You'll see we have an Ogryn bonehead at the top with Ripper Gun and devotional back banner, as well as a variety of medieval and feral ogres that could be used to round out his squad. Here's a closer look at the top figures. I have that ogre on the right, and I'm on the lookout for the one on the left, who looks to me like he was sculpted with 40k in mind, very similar in style to the bonehead next to him. So I bought several metal boneheads back in the late 1980s when they first came out. I finished this guy, but I opted not to include the devotional banner stand, a big bendy piece of lead that I didn't want to deal with, so he has a slot on the back for that stand, but doesn't have the stand itself. And here's another one that I glued together. That's about 30-year-old green stuff probably, but he has not been painted and or properly based yet. And here's yet another one I got secondhand, and he needs some touch-ups. So he's got a few chips here and there, but I just really dig the Back to the Future goggles and the animal print leggings this guy is wearing. So he is very 1980s. Next, we jump forward to the middle of the next decade to check out the 2nd edition Imperial Guard Codex from 1995. In this codex, Imperial Guard Ogryns hail from rocky, barren worlds that are both harsh and cold, as opposed to prison planets or high-gravity worlds. Also, Ogryns now cause fear because of their imposing nature, but boneheads, oddly enough, seem to have been phased out. The Ogryn automatic combat shotgun still always hits at short range, though now it benefits from the sustained fire special rule. As an added bonus, every Imperial Guard Ogryn is now equipped with a Ripper Gun and frag grenades and can upgrade to mesh armor if desired. Here's where things go a bit bonkers though. By second edition, the original Ogryn sculpts have been replaced by a new line of Looney Tunes-style, somewhat comedic, multi-part metal sculpts. These figs are obviously much less serious than their predecessors, and wouldn't look that out of place in a Ren and Stimpy cartoon. On a more serious note, the second edition Codex also features an entry for the legendary Ogryn bodyguard, Nork Dead Dog. It says, "It is not often that a hero of the Imperium survives into old age, but Nork finally retired at the age of 110, returning to his homeworld of 4-manned 6 to live out his final years as chief of his people." That, folks, is as close to a happy ending as we're likely to get in the 40k universe, so good on you, Nork. So I picked up a bunch of these second edition Ogryn over the years. These were painted by somebody else, but we've based them so they're consistent with some of our other ones. Now, I couldn't tell you why GW decided to pivot to this sort of comedic caricature style for their Ogryns, but I have to admit I am gradually warming up to the sculpts, just because they are so unabashedly over the top and representative of their era. So along with the second edition sculpts, GW also retired the whole concept of medieval/feral Ogryn, and now every Ogryn gets a Ripper gun, which has a much larger barrel than the early ones. Next, we're going to briefly jump to the year 2000 and White Dwarf 241, which features a page dedicated to Nork Dead Dog, the Imperium's favorite bodyguard. There isn't a lot of new information in here, but it does show photos of one of the Nork Dead Dog metal sculpts, which we happen to have. So here is a second-hand Nork that I picked up specifically for this video because he's too important not to have represented. But I've seen photos of an even earlier Nork, which is pretty hysterical, and I don't mean that in a good way, so you should look it up. My only observation here is that he seems kind of puny for a hero of the Imperium. You would think that Dead Dog would be quite a bit bigger than a normal Ogryn, but as they say, it is the size of the fight in the dog that's important. Moving quickly now, let's check out the revised 3rd edition Imperial Guard Codex from 2003. In this edition, Bonehead leaders have returned as an optional Ogryn upgrade, which is useful if you're trying to coax your Ogryn squad into a transport without some other officer present. Jumping over the 4th edition Codex, which was just for Catachans, right? We hit the 5th edition Imperial Guard Codex in 2008. Sadly, the Ripper gun no longer automatically hits at short range, but it is Assault 3. Also, Ogryns now benefit from Furious Charge and Stubborn, but they still don't like being shoehorned into transports. Quote, "It is a thankless task for the poor Imperial Guardsmen who inevitably get stuck in the cramped confines of the vehicle's hold with the foul-smelling, bulky abhumans who have scant regard for personal hygiene and are prone to violent, unrelenting bouts of motion sickness." Here are some updated Ogryn sculpts featured in the 5th edition Codex. I'm unsure when these minis were released or how long they lasted, but as you can see, the Ogryns got a lot more serious by 5th edition. They look a lot like giant, rage-filled Cadians. Nork gets his own page in the 5th edition Codex, putting him on par with other heroes of the Imperium such as Pask, Straken, and Yorick, but that's only fair since he personally saved the lives of over 100 Imperial officers, so again, Nork, good on you. And finally, we'll end our Ogryn retrospective with 2014's White Dwarf number 11, which was my introduction to the current line of plastic Ogryn and Bulgryn. Now, GW has been selling these figures for going on 8 years now, so there must be something to them, but I have to admit they're really not my favorite. I much prefer the modern Ogryn sculpts produced for Necromunda, Horus Heresy, and Blackstone Fortress, and if these guys weren't so darn expensive, I would have bought them all. And if I can just throw out one suggestion to the GW gods, I don't think you've ever quite nailed the sculpt for Nork Dead Dog. He's been fighting the good fight going on 30 years now, so the next time there's an Ogryn update, let's give him a killer sculpt that befits one of the Imperium's greatest heroes. So, just saying. So I guess that's a wrap on our Warhammer 40,000 Ogryn retrospective, starting all the way back in 1987. I'm sure we missed a few relevant articles or codex entries, but I was actually surprised by how much information I had on hand just reading through my back issues. So Lynn, which Ogryns are your favorites?
So I've got 3. 2 we talked about and 1 we didn't.
Okay.
But I'm going to bring him in anyway.
That's fine.
Okay.
All right, Lynn, so you are a fan of the 2nd edition Muscle Beach style Ogryns, apparently.
I like their muscles. They have very defined, nice muscles. And I like their chains and his cool helmet And this guy has some really cool tattoos, and I like his weapons and his pose.
So this is a pretty good example of the difference between lead and pewter. This is a lead figure purchased probably in the late 80s. And this is a white metal figure, a pewter figure purchased, I don't know, early 90s, maybe just after they switched over. And this guy's developing a really nice patina as he oxidizes. So it'd be kind of a shame to paint him at this point.
I kind of like his coloring. I think we should just pick out some details on him, like maybe his clothes.
So he could be like a golem or a titan or something like that, made out of metal.
Which ones are your favorite?
Well, I guess I'm a fan of the older ones from the late 80s. I like these guys quite a lot.
I kind of like him too. He's kind of fun.
He's a good medieval Ogryn right there. And like I said, I'm kind of warming up to these guys because they're just absurd. And whoever designed them just went for it. They didn't hold back. They had a vision and they just executed it. The downside is they don't really fit stylistically with some of the more serious guys. So I'm not entirely sure when second edition rolled around, YGW didn't just say, this is the style and we're going to make more Ogryn in this style. But that's not what they decided to do. I guess they wanted some fresh stuff. And yeah, I can understand that. Got to keep mixing it up, right? Okay, folks, that's it for our Ogryn retrospective. Thanks as always for stopping by. We hope you enjoyed today's video. We'll be back soon with some more miniature wargaming goodness. But until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.